dark depth, Neo-Stoicism constitutes the latest and most uncompromising evolution in the Stoic philosophical tradition. It emerged in the early 21st century amid conditions of profound existential fracture. The system preserves the foundational principles of classical Stoicism: virtue as the sole intrinsic good, the absolute dichotomy of control, and the disciplined use of reason, while deliberately descending into the psychological, moral, and cosmic shadows that previous versions tended to soften or avoid. It functions as a rigorous framework for those who have directly confronted personal ruin, systemic cruelty, moral ambiguity, and the indifferent void of meaning. Rather than offering optimistic resilience or providential comfort, it cultivates meaningful endurance in the face of annihilation through the forging of an unbreakable character. The historical development of Stoicism supplies the necessary context for understanding this evolution. The tradition originated in the early Stoa around 300 BCE, when Zeno of Citium began teaching in Athens. That initial phase developed a comprehensive system of logic, physics, and ethics grounded in the concept of a rational, divine order, the logos, that governed a deterministic cosmos. Virtue was regarded as the only true good, and destructive emotions were understood as errors of judgment. The Middle Stoa, extending from the 2nd to the 1st centuries BCE, adapted these ideas for a Roman context through figures such as Panaetius and Posidonius. Emphasis moved toward practical ethics, civic duty, and cosmopolitanism, with less weight placed on rigid theoretical physics. The late or Roman Stoa, flourishing in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, produced the best-known surviving writings from Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. In this period, the philosophy became intensely practical, focusing on daily emotional regulation, acceptance of fate, and virtuous conduct amid political instability. Following the ascendancy of Christianity, which absorbed and modified selected Stoic concepts, the school entered a long period of relative dormancy. A significant revival appeared during the Renaissance in the form of Neo-Stoicism, notably through Justus Lipsius, who combined Stoic ideas of constancy with Christian theology to address the violence of religious wars. Stoic themes continued to surface in Enlightenment rationalism and later thought, but no distinct organized school persisted until the late 20th century. Modern Stoicism then arose as a broad popular revival. It connected ancient Stoic techniques with cognitive behavioral therapy and empirical psychology, removing ancient metaphysical commitments and concentrating on practical tools for resilience, agency, and navigating uncertainty. This version gained wide appeal through accessible writings and online communities, often integrating elements of mindfulness and personal development. Dark depth Neo-Stoicism developed as a response to the perceived shortcomings of these earlier phases when confronted with 21st century conditions. Phenomena such as climate disruption, artificial intelligence eroding traditional sources of meaning, deepening political divisions, and widespread existential disillusionment revealed the limits of comfort-oriented or productivity-focused interpretations. The philosophy integrates the ancient ethical core with insights from existentialism, particularly the notion of absurd rebellion and a radical Amor, Fati, together with Jungian shadow integration. It upholds strict Stoic discipline while requiring complete engagement with darkness, the full spectrum of rage, despair, self-deception, and the blind machinery of entropy. The outcome is neither emotional suppression nor shallow positivity, but a form of tragic heroism grounded in sovereign character. The architecture of dark depth Neo-Stoicism rests on 7 central pillars. Virtue forged in shadow reinterprets the 4 cardinal virtues as instruments hardened in personal darkness. Wisdom consists in seeing through self-deception while acknowledging one's own capacity for cruelty. Courage involves forward movement despite internal warnings of failure. Justice extends concern to the suffering and even to perpetrators of harm, recognizing the shared presence of the void in every human being. Temperance imposes discipline on the full force of destructive impulses without resorting to repression. The dichotomy of control, absolute, maintains that only one's judgments, willed actions, and character fall within the domain of control. All external events, other people's actions, bodily decline, and cosmic processes remain forever outside it. Acceptance in this context is an active, fierce refusal to waste finite will on the uncontrollable. Tragic Amor, Fati calls for affirmative love of fate in its most brutal manifestations. Betrayal, bodily decay, meaninglessness, and ultimate erasure. Memento mori, eternal, treats death not as a distant endpoint, but as the permanent atmosphere of existence, charging every decision with the urgency of one who is already dying. Shadow integration demands deliberate descent into one's darkest impulses, envy, rage, and the capacity for betrayal, so that they can be examined and weaponized by reason rather than denied. Existential rebellion recognizes the absurdity and frequent cruelty of the cosmos, yet insists on creating pockets of justice and meaning where none are provided, embodying the figure of Sisyphus who smiles while pushing the boulder. Cosmopolitan darkness widens concern to encompass a world in flames, requiring labor on behalf of the collective good, even while acknowledging universal vulnerability to entropy. Metaphysically, the philosophy describes a dark cosmos, an indifferent entropy engine that operates without purpose, audience, or moral order. No benevolent logos directs events. The universe proceeds through blind causation and inevitable dissolution. Any sense of order or freedom arises exclusively from the virtuous will that conscious beings impose upon this chaos. This view eliminates illusions of cosmic justice or external salvation, leaving individual character as the sole element with lasting significance. Epistemologically and logically, truth operates as a precise instrument rather than a source of reassurance. Every impression, belief, and narrative undergoes merciless scrutiny. Self-deception is identified as the fundamental obstacle. Logic functions as a practical tool for dissecting motives and eliminating cognitive distortions. Each idea is evaluated according to 3 tests: whether it remains valid even if destructive to the self, whether it increases or diminishes personal sovereignty, and whether it would still be affirmed in the absence of any witnesses. The resulting epistemology is deliberately stripped, favoring clarity and substantive weight over emotional comfort. Daily existence is structured around the ritual of the abyss, a sequence of disciplined practices. The morning descent requires sitting in darkness to identify potential external catastrophes and internal shadows, followed by the explicit affirmation of virtues to meet them. The shadow journal consists of an unsparing evening examination of moments of flinching, self-deception, or attempts to disguise darkness as virtue. Voluntary abyss exposure incorporates regular acts of deliberate discomfort, prolonged cold, silence, fasting, or direct engagement with accounts of human atrocity, intended to incinerate remaining illusions. Tragic premeditatio involves twice daily, vivid visualization of the full range of horrors, from personal loss to moral collapse and societal breakdown, until composure is achieved in the face of them. The nightly Amor, Fati recitation confronts the dark and declares acceptance and love of it as the foundation of freedom. Each day is completed with an act of defiant justice, the performance of one concrete deed that serves the wider community at personal cost and without expectation of recognition or reward. Beyond the sphere of individual practice, dark depth Neo-Stoicism extends into questions of legacy and transmission. Practitioners act as carriers of steady light within surrounding darkness. They engage in mentoring without softening truths, produce works that may survive them, and sow seeds of virtue in uncertain ground. Death ceases to be regarded as threat and becomes instead the ultimate expression of sovereignty. The idea of abyssal immortality arises, a character forged so densely that its influence continues to propagate even after the individual has been erased by time. Dark depth Neo-Stoicism addresses those who find earlier Stoic interpretations inadequate for the depth of contemporary disillusionment. It makes no promises of happiness, success, or cosmic reassurance. Its aim is to equip individuals to move through despair, moral gray zones, and universal indifference while preserving sovereign integrity. In a historical moment largely stripped of comforting grand narratives, the philosophy develops the tragic hero who has traversed the shadow and emerged more fully human, steady, unblinking, and tempered precisely in the darkness it refuses to deny. It does not instruct seekers to look for light at the end of the tunnel. It teaches how to become that light from deep inside the tunnel itself.